Robert Mueller's investigation entered its 8 millionth week. The spotlight turned to two of our president's toadiest toadies. Walking sweat-stained Michael Cohen shared valuable dirt on Trump's Russia dealings, while man most likely to be dangled out a window, Paul Manafort, double-flipped against Mueller and back to Trump. Technically, both Bebop and Rocksteady here are at the government's mercy because they got nailed for committing financial crimes like fraud. But there might be a different reason the law is cracking down on them, according to alleged scumbag lawyer and alleged lawyer scumbag Alan Dershowitz. Try not to vomit on your television while he talks.
This trial today is not about Manafort. If Manafort hadn't been associated with the Trump campaign, he'd be out in New York or wherever doing his business.
Yeah, how dare you prosecute this criminal just because he did his crimes with that other alleged criminal? Unfortunately, Dershowitz is right that rich people like Manafort and Cohen often face no accountability for their crimes. White-collar prosecutions are at a 20-year low, and we all ignore financial crime because it's dull. There's a reason you never see this on TV. That show would be so much better if they got Ice-T to play the calculator. America is so apathetic about financial crime that we couldn't even get any meaningful indictments from the Great Recession, the worst thing to happen in 2008 besides Russell Brand. After a bunch of asshole bank executives wrecked the global economy in the biggest fraud ever, only one Wall Street banker was jailed. I wonder how they chose him to take the fall.
The grand total of bankers behind bars tonight is one, Kareem Sarageldin.
Okay, you can stop there. Mystery solved. What is wrong with us? We used to care about this stuff. Back in 1929, we had a financial collapse that made everyone so poor they had to wear barrels. Which, what the fuck? How is that cheaper than pants? Regardless, people were so furious about bankers getting off scot-free, they went after the former president of the New York Stock Exchange for embezzlement and sent him to Sing Sing. But when the crash's sequel rolled around in 2008, we weren't so adamant about nailing financial big shots. Part of that is rooted in the early 2000s when the government prosecuted the Arthur Andersen accounting firm for obstruction of justice in the Enron scandal. But that conviction blew up in their faces.
The Enron task force prosecutes the firm, Arthur Andersen. They win at trial. Arthur Andersen goes out of business. Tens of thousands of people, sadly, unfortunately, are put on the street, out of work. And something amazing happens, which is that there's a PR victory where Andersen manages to change the subject from accounting fraud to these innocent people being put out of work.
That's right. They exploited every American's greatest weakness, our love for accountants. To make matters worse, the conviction was overturned on a technicality, leaving the Justice Department skittish about prosecuting corrupt companies because employees might lose jobs. So instead, they found a way to pretend to hold corporations accountable through something called the Deferred Prosecution Agreement. That's when prosecutors give corporate offenders a fine and say, "We won't charge you if you promise to behave from now on." You might know this legal move from its other name, being white. People think of corporate crime as less serious than other crimes because of the lack of violence, but it is not always bloodless.
It was a costly day for General Motors. The automaker has agreed to settle with the Department of Justice over the company's handling of defective ignition switches.
The top U.S. automaker will pay a roughly $900 million fine and sign a deferred prosecution agreement for concealing the issue. The problem caused crashes that have been linked to at least 124 deaths and injured 275 more. The bottom line, GM settles its ignition switch case, hoping to put its probe in its rearview mirror.
That is terrible news, but at least it goes down easier with the funky background music of CNBC's DJ Class Action. The penalties for white-collar crime are too small to be a deterrent to giant corporations who see them as the cost of doing business. After the housing crash, the big banks were fined $321 billion, which is a lot of money, except when compared to the $1 trillion in profits they made. But perhaps the best example of why we need to take this shit more seriously, if prosecutors went after rich people the way they go after everyone else, this hateful vortex of hot tub gonorrhea never would have made it near the White House. He'd be doing a stage production of The Apprentice in prison. Remember that expose about Trump's finances from a few months ago? Probably not, so here's a reminder.
The New York Times has just published an exhaustive article on President Trump, which accuses the president of dodging taxes and committing fraud. They write that Donald Trump received the equivalent of more than $400 million from his father's business empire. He and his siblings, the Times writes, set up a sham corporation to disguise millions of dollars in gifts from their parents. When Donald Trump was 3 years old, he was earning $200,000 a year.
And when he was 4 years old, he lost it all in the most adorable failed casino you've ever seen. The Times ran 14,000 words detailing decades of Trump's shenanigans, but nobody cared. The desperate newspaper even reprinted it 4 days later, kind of like when no one responds to your hilarious tweet, so you tweet it again just in case everyone missed it. Trump is a sleazy con man who's been specializing in rich guy crimes since the disco era. But law enforcement has always backed off or let him go with a slap on the wrist. There were his acts of racial discrimination, his fishy real estate deals, his bullshit university, his swindling of people who worked for him, and his violations of labor law, antitrust law, gaming law, self-dealing law, anti-money laundering regulations, and the Cuban embargo. He breaks laws almost as often as he breaks dinner plans with Tiffany. But compare the way prosecutors treat Trump with the way they treat people in non-white collar cases, like the 2,000 people serving life sentences for nonviolent drug crimes. Rich white perps in suits even get better treatment than people who don't commit crimes.
I was charged with conspiracy. I was also given 3 separate charges of possession with intent to distribute, cocaine, crack, and marijuana.
So this is because the person you were involved with at the time, he was dealing drugs, and conspiracy meaning you knew about it.
Correct.
You didn't have to be doing it, but you get his charges anyway.
Yeah, he was deceased, so they had nobody to charge. I was the only one left, so they charged me with it. And I was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison.
You shouldn't be prosecuted because of the people around you. We don't blame Ted Cruz for the fact that his dad murdered JFK. Above all, America is a nation of laws. Well, laws and pork rinds, but let's focus on the laws. But those laws don't mean anything unless criminals who launder money, drain people's life savings, and kill motorists are at least as afraid of jail time as women with shady boyfriends. We'll be right back.